Problem 1. A Limited issued 1 lakh equity shares. So the company here is A Limited and they issues 1 lakh equity shares. The whole of the issue was underwritten as X, Y, and Z. So there are 3 underwriters. And they've given here the percentage 40%. X is taking responsibility for 40%. What's the meaning of this? Whole issue of the whole of the issue was underwritten. That means the entire issue was underwritten. X took responsibility for 40%. Y took responsibility for 30%, and Z took responsibility for 30%. That means X is responsible for 40,000 shares. Y and Z are responsible for 30,000 shares each. Okay, so that's how it works. So in case not a single share is purchased, even though the issue is made to the public and not a single share is purchased, X will have to take 40,000 shares, Y will have to take 30,000 shares, and Z will have to take 30,000 shares. That's the meaning of it. Okay. Applications for 80,000 shares were received in all. Now, applications from whom? Applications, if the shares are issued to the public, applications are received from the public, the investing public, the general public. Applications for 80,000 shares were received in all. Remember, 1 lakh equity shares were issued. Okay. Applications for 80,000 shares were received in all, out of which applications for 20,000 shares had the stamp of X. So the moment you see have the stamp, that means they were marked applications in favor of X. That means they were received through X. X didn't buy them. Okay, don't confuse. X didn't buy them. Through X, the investing public have bought them. Okay, the general public, various individuals, various shareholders have purchased them. Those for 10,000 shares had that of Y, that's stamp of Y, and 20,000 shares had that of Z, stamp of Z. The remaining applications for 30,000 shares did not bear any stamp. Now, what's the meaning of this? 30,000 shares did not bear any stamp. If you see, total applications received were 80,000. Out of 80,000, 20 were for X, 10 of Y, and 20x, 10 of Y, and 20z. So 20 plus 10, 30, 30 plus 20, 50. Okay, so out of 80, 50 had stamps either for X, Y, or Z. The remaining applications for 30, that means 80 minus 50, 30 did not bear any stamp. Those were unmarked applications. Show the liability of the underwriter. So before I start that, I have to do a simple calculation of what we are trying to find out. Okay, so out of 1 lakh shares, applications have been received for 80,000. Okay, applications have been received for 80,000. Yes or no? Out of 1 lakh shares that we issued, applications were received for 80,000. That means shares of 20,000 have not been bought by anybody. Shares of 20,000 have not been bought by anybody. And these 20,000 shares, who's going to take them up? The underwriters. Okay, out of 1 lakh, 80,000 applications were received. Now, when we say applications were received from whom? The general public. Okay, and this 80,000 has marked as well as unmarked. Marked are the ones that are received through underwriters. Unmarked are the ones that are received by the company directly. So at the end, the underwriters will be responsible only for 20,000 shares. So now we are going to prepare a statement to see how this 20,000 is going to be divided. Who has to take up what? There are 3 underwriters. Are they going to take it up equally, or in what ratio are they going to take it up? So we prepare something called as the statement showing the liability of the underwriters. What's the meaning of this? Liability of the underwriters is how much each underwriter has to take up. That's what we are going to do. Okay, so we have to see how this 20,000 is going to be divided. So we have columns called gross liability, and then we have X, Y, and Z. Gross liability, X, Y, and Z. So first we start with the total shares. We are going to do the same thing here. We have started with the total shares. We have seen how many have been received from the public, and then we are going to see how much each one has to take. Only thing we are going to do it column underwriter wise. Okay. So first we start with some, sorry, this is not gross liability, this is particulars. Particulars. Okay. We start with gross liability. Now gross liability is the total amount that each underwriter had to take up in case there was the public did not subscribe at all. Okay. So out of 1 lakh, out of 1 lakh, how much responsibility did X take? 40%. That means 40,000 shares. Out of 1 lakh, X took responsibility for 40,000 shares, Y took responsibility for 30,000 shares, and Z took the responsibility for 30,000 shares. What's the meaning of this? That is, if the public did not subscribe to a single share, X would have to take 40, Y would have had to take 30, and Z would have had to take 30. But now we know applications were received. So we need to minus those applications. So first thing that we minus is less marked applications. Less marked applications. Okay, less marked application. Now we know how many shares have been received in favor of each or because of these underwriters. In case of X, 20,000 shares had the stamp of X. In case of X, it is 20,000. In case of Y, those of 10,000 shares had that of Y, so 10,000. And in case of Z, 20,000 shares had that of Z. Okay, so actually X's responsibility initially was 40,000. Now since he has received 20,000 in his favor, his liability comes down to 20. Here it comes down to again 20 and here it comes down to 10. Okay, so initially X had to take up 40, but now since he has received marked applications in his favor, it comes down to 20. Similarly for this. Now out of 80, we are minusing this. Okay, we are minusing the total applications. Out of 80, how much have we minus? 20 plus 10 plus 20. That is 50. That means 30 are still yet to be minus, and those 30 did not bear any stamp. Those 30 did not bear any stamp. So we call them less unmarked applications. Less unmarked applications. Now the question is, how do we divide this 30? These 30 which did not bear any mark towards any underwriter, how do we divide this 30? This 30 will be divided in the ratio of 4 is to 3 is to 3. How did I get 4 is to 3? This 40, or you can say 40 is to 30 is to 30, or 4 is to 3 is to 3. Okay, so ratio of gross liability. Unmarked applications to be divided in always in the ratio of gross liability. So if I divide 30,000 into 4 is to 3 is to 3, I will get 12,000, 6,000, sorry, 12,000, 9,000 and 9,000. I hope everyone knows to do this. 30,000 into 4 divided by 10. How do I get 10? 4 plus 3 plus 3, 10. Then 30,000 for Y, it will be 30,000 into 3 divided by 10. For Z also 30,000 into 3 divided by 10. So if you put these 3 together, you will get 12 plus 9 is 21. 21 plus 9 is 30. Okay. So finally, we get actually 20 minus 12 will get 8 here. 20 minus 9 you'll get 11. And 10 minus 9 you'll get 1,000. Now if you check this, 8 plus 11 comes to 19. 19 plus 1 comes to 20. So we have come back to this. This is what we have done. We have taken the gross liability minus the applications that have received, and that means X is X from the balance 20 that nobody took up. Out of 1 lakh, 80 applications were received from the public only for 80. That means for the balance 20 that nobody took up, X has to take up 8, Y has to take up 11, and Z has to take up 1. And we call this net. We call this net. We call this net liability. This is basically our answer. This is basically the answer. Net liability. Okay, so this is basically the answer. So this is what we have to do. This I just did a simple working. What is this? This is more an elaborate version of this, showing it underwriter wise. Okay. So out of the total shares issued 1 lakh, 40 plus 30 comes to 1 lakh. 80,000. If you put your marked and unmarked, you'll get 80,000. 20 nobody took up. So this 20, these underwriters have to take up in the following manner.